Welcome back to your weekly edition of the MMAOddsbreaker Fight Breakdown Show. I'm Frank Trigg. That's Nick Kalikas. This week, UFC 187, Johnson versus Cormier, May 23rd, MGM Grand Garden Arena, Las Vegas, Nevada. Of course, the prelims can be seen on Fight Pass and Fox Sports 1. The big shakeup, obviously, is the main event where John Jones has been pulled out. He got suspended and removed from the title. And now Daniel Cormier stepped in to face Anthony Johnson. But first, we need to talk about the co-main event, which is VITOR Belfort versus Chris Weidman. Now, this was an interesting matchup because a lot of fighters that I've seen, Nick, are picking VITOR to win this fight, but he has to be the underdog in this one because, one, Weidman's undefeated, and he beat the greatest of all time devastatingly every time that he fought Henderson Silva. So what's the five dimes line on this first? And then what do you think VITOR's actual real chances are?
Well, right now, Five Dimes has Weidman as a favorite, minus 525. The comeback plus 415 on VITOR Belfort. So kind of a steep line, steep price out there. But you know what? It's hard to argue where it's at right now because, I mean, stylistically speaking, Weidman just has it all, really. He's got the wrestling, he's got the stand-up skill, he's got the jiu-jitsu. I mean, he is the total package. He showed a lot recently, especially in his wins over Machida, and just getting the title, like you said, over Anderson Silva a couple times as well. So the guy's definitely legit, and even though VITOR has that crazy knockout power and is a very skilled, talented fighter, still stylistically, it seems like a bad matchup.
You know, I think Weidman can grind this one out. He's got a super high pace. He's got, and we've all seen VITOR. He fades. Even, no one questions his cardio anymore because he finishes fights so early. But this fight going into the fifth round, I see VITOR trying to start the fade come time in the fourth. You get the championships rounds. He can start to fall apart a little bit. And Weidman is so much stronger mentally. We've all talked about in the early career from VITOR of him having a bad mental problem. Do you think that he's been able to get over his mental humps now that he's down at 85? He feels comfortable. He seems to be so much more happy at the weight class. He seems to be training harder. But do you think mentally he's going to be strong going into the championship rounds when his cardio system starts to come into question and he's going to start to feel that lactic acid build up in his muscles?
You know what? I'm not sure because obviously there's those TRT issues as well. He's off TRT, so mentally I'm not sure how that's going to impact him. I mean, he's got to be a little bit less confident, I would think. I mean, like I said, haven't been in that position, so I really don't know. So I would assume that it is a little bit of a mental issue, thinking, all right, am I going to be a little bit weaker? How's my overall conditioning, my explosiveness, everything across the board? So I think he's going to kind of second guess himself that way in a bit. And you're right. I mean, the bad thing about Belfort in the past is his cardio has let him down at times. Now, against Jones, he hung in there actually a lot longer than people thought. Obviously, and that was a higher weight class, so you got to give him credit there. And he has looked phenomenal, but there's just a lot of question marks around VITOR right now. So I think he's going to have to win early to get it done. If not, he's probably going to get beaten, probably finished himself.
If VITOR wins, immediate rematch with Chris Weidman?
I don't know because, right now, the middleweight division, I mean, there's so many sharks out there that ROCKHOLD's waiting, Jacares waiting. So I don't know if that's actually the case. It depends. If VITOR goes out there and just destroys Weidman, I don't think Weidman will get an immediate rematch. If it's close, competitive, maybe we'll see it.
Well, the good news, or the news, not the good news for Jacares, but the good news for the weight class is that Jacares is going to be out for a little bit. He had a meniscal tear, just had surgery, so he could that actually resets the format of how things are looking. Now all you have to worry about it really is ROCKHOLD, if VITOR wins, is ROCKHOLD next, or will they give Weidman an immediate rematch? And if they do give Weidman an immediate rematch, how upset and pissed off will ROCKHOLD be because now he's being passed over again? Becomes a very interesting format. I'm sticking with the champion. I'm sticking with Chris Weidman. That's my pick. I think he finishes the fight late in the fourth or fifth rounds. I think that his timing and his ability and his pressure is going to crack VITOR. What's your pick?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pick against Weidman as well. I think that, like I said, he's basically the total package. He could do it all, and I think he will eventually take over. He's just got to weather an early storm, I think, and then maybe round 3, round 4, round 5, I think he finds a way to finish the fight. If it hits the scorecards, I think he's going to win at least 4 out of, or maybe even all 5 rounds, so to be honest with you. So it is his fight to win or lose, but at the price, honestly, I think it's a stay away from point. I mean, there's no value either way. It's tempting to throw maybe some cash on VITOR as the underdog, but at the same time, I just don't think he's going to come through, so probably save your money. And, a lot of people are going to be parlaying Weidman. I understand that as well, but for me, it's kind of a pass situation, to be honest with you.
Okay, and so from the best insider we have in the game, Nick Kalikas, he's saying pass on this one if you're going to lay a bet down, just because the line is so big over there at 5 dimes. Now, moving on to the main event, Anthony Johnson versus Daniel Cormier. Both these guys, when I interviewed Daniel Cormier here for MMAOddsbreaker, we talked about it, and he said if he wasn't fighting Anthony Johnson, he'd be cheering for Anthony Johnson. This is a fighter that he respects. He's reinvented himself 3 or 4 different times. He had a problem with Josh Koscheck, got kicked out, couldn't make weight, couldn't make 170, couldn't make 185. All of a sudden now he's at 205. He grew up literally over 18 months and becomes a man in a huge body, huge strength, and amazing speed, working with Jake Bonacci down there at the Black Zillions, doing an incredible job. But does he have enough to stop Cormier, who now is in his 2nd title fight? And a guy that's in his 2nd title fight is always hungrier than he was in the first time. How do you think this one's going to break down, and what's 5 Dimes have this line at?
Right now, the line over 5 Dimes is -135 for Cormier and +115 for Johnson. So, respect for Johnson. I know, Cormier is one of those wrestlers that, he's looked phenomenal throughout his career. And even his fight with Jones, that was a competitive fight, especially early on. So, he is definitely one of the best fighters at 205, no question about it. He was one of the best fighters at heavyweight before he made the drop down. So, Cormier is just a talent all across the board. You could compare what I just said with Chris Weidman. Cormier has similar attributes as well. Maybe not the overall package like Weidman has, I think, but Cormier still has other areas that he excels at. And one of them, obviously, he's a tremendous wrestler. So his game plan, I think, is going to be putting the pressure on Johnson, trying to get the fight to the floor, obviously, and controlling him. But, man, look what Johnson's done recently. He's looked phenomenal since, even outside of the UFC. He's finally got focused. Like you said, his training camp, everything has come together well. I think his mental state, he's a lot more mature than we've seen in the past. So he's got a lot of good things going for him. And as far as pure knockout power, I don't think there's many that are better, actually, right now than Johnson. Look what he's done. Gustafsson, who's done that to him? Not even the champion John Jones was able to have that much success, especially early on, like he did. Phil Davis wasn't able to get the fight to the floor against Johnson. He's a talented wrestler as well, and Johnson basically destroyed him for 3 rounds. So it is a hard spot to bet against Anthony Johnson these days. I know Cormier is so talented, but still laying juice against a guy that can knock you out that fast and that much power and has improved that much, I don't know if it's a good idea, really.
And here's the other question I have, too, coming in from Cormier. Cormier said, he had so much animosity. He was so angry at John Jones. He was wanted to beat him up so bad that took all the energy out of him. And in a very long training camp, he's told me that he left everything he had in the training room, and he didn't have anything left to put on the canvas when it was time for the fight. This is a shorter training camp. He got moved from the New Orleans card and got pushed over to the MGM card for the UFC 187. So now, obviously, you're looking at a guy who has a shorter training camp. He's got to do a lot of rounds with Cain Velasquez because he needs somebody who's big, fast, and strong, kind of to mimic, as much as you can with Anthony Johnson. Do you think a shorter training camp is actually going to help Daniel in this situation, or does it hurt him?
You know what? I listened to the interview that you did with him, and he thinks it's going to help him as well. And it makes sense because he's going to get solid, 6 weeks of actual training and then 1 week for the weight cut or whatever, too, as well. So 7 weeks, not too bad. Most fighters, they prefer like an 8-week type of training camp usually. So I think it's going to be close. I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on him, especially if he did overtrain, like you said, in the Jones fight too. So I don't think that's going to come really into play here. And especially if he does win the fight, I think he is going to be able to kind of grind Johnson out along the way if he does win. If not, he's going to probably get knocked out if he loses. So I think if he hits the scorecards, you got to favor Cormier. But if not, if it's going to finish inside, I think you got to favor Johnson. So either way, it's one of those matchups. I think as a fight goes, even if he hasn't had a couple extra weeks, I think you'll still be able to go 5, especially with both guys fading as it goes. 5 rounds is tough to do for anybody, really, especially in a championship caliber fight like that. So I think both of them will fade as the fight goes on a little bit, so that he can still maintain, if he doesn't get knocked out, especially early on in that fight, he'll probably be able to maintain enough of a pace to maybe grind Johnson out. But I don't know if he's going to be able to do it, man. Johnson's looked phenomenal, like I said, so it's going to be tough.
Final pick. Who are you taking?
I got to go with Anthony Johnson, honestly. I know it's a little bit surprising. I think that if he could keep the fight upright, I'm not sure too many people at 205 right now can deal with that kind of power. So I think it is a situation that it's kind of dangerous for Cormier stepping in. Like you said, a little bit on short notice, not too bad. But if he can't get the fight to the floor, you got to favor the striking of Johnson. So I'm going to pick Johnson to win this fight.
I'm actually leaning towards Johnson as well. I know it's surprising for everybody at home since Daniel Cormier and I are friends, and he is a wrestler, and I tend to always pick the wrestler if it's a very close line like this one is. But I think, like Nick said, Anthony Johnson, if you don't get him down to the ground and beat him up from his back, you have a very difficult time putting him away. He's always going to find a way to hit you and make it look good every time he hits you, whether he knocks you out or not. I just have a feeling that Johnson's going to finish this one inside the 5 rounds.
Yeah, I agree with you too. It's a dog or pass situation for sure in this one. Even though the line's close, it's still so hard to lay against juice against a guy like Johnson for sure.
Well, that's it for us this week. This is the MMA Oddsbreaker Fight Breakdown Show. That's Nick Kalikas. I'm Frank Trigg. We'll see you again next week.